There's nothing, my mistakes have been put on the public stage. Other people's mistakes aren't.
Sarah Ferguson makes a major social media change after her ex, Prince Andrew, gives up his royal title.
As you're thinking of it.
Go on.
I believe it is a beautiful word of love. And I think that
Sarah Ferguson makes a major social media change after her ex, Prince Andrew, gives up his royal title. As you're thinking of it, go on. I believe it is a beautiful word of love. And I think that kind Sarah Ferguson just went on Piers Morgan's podcast and said something that's got everyone losing their minds. She's talking about Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew, a connection from way back in 2009 that nobody knew about. And here's the thing, she's not just talking. She's got people who were actually there ready to tell their side of the story. We're talking drivers, close friends, people who saw what happened behind closed doors. This isn't some random gossip. This is about a hidden timeline that completely changes everything we thought we knew about Meghan before she became a duchess. So what really went down all those years ago? And why is Sarah bringing it up now? Let's get into it. Now, before we jump in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because this story is moving fast and you don't want to miss what happens next. Drop a like too. It really helps. And here's what you should be asking yourself. The moment those words hit the air, everything shifted. You could practically feel it, the silence before the storm. Sarah Ferguson wasn't laughing. She wasn't hedging. She wasn't speaking in riddles. She was calm, measured, almost surgical, like someone who had waited years for the right moment to finally open a door that had been sealed shut for over a decade. And when that door cracked open, it didn't creak, it exploded. Because this wasn't just a passing comment. This wasn't nostalgia. This was a timeline being dragged out into the light, a version of history that suddenly made people sit up and say, wait, that doesn't line up with what we were told. And Sarah knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't speculating. She wasn't asking questions. She was laying down markers, planting seeds, letting the audience know there are witnesses, there are dates, there are people who were there when no cameras were watching.
A semi-expensive yacht bird, and she knows it.
Many of you have seen this picture already. You see that there?
If Sarah's got people ready to talk, what else has been buried all this time? Let's find out. That's the question that started echoing everywhere. Because once someone like Sarah Ferguson says she's got people ready to talk, it stops being hypothetical. It becomes a countdown. And then she takes it further. She rewinds the clock all the way back to 2009, long before palace gates, long before royal weddings, long before carefully polished narratives, back when Meghan was still trying to find her footing, doing small acting jobs, moving in circles most people never paid attention to. Sarah paints this picture of a London party. Private, select, not the kind of event where strangers accidentally brush shoulders. And Meghan is introduced to Andrew through what Sarah calls mutual friends. That phrase hangs heavy because anyone who understands Andrew's social world back then knows exactly what kind of access that implies. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't random. This was curated.
How relatable is that, eh? You're a single mum of two in Basingstoke. You've just come in off the night shift.
But here's where it gets interesting. Sarah doesn't just say they met once at some party and went their separate ways. She's claiming they stayed in touch after that initial meeting like regular meetups that nobody knew about. This wasn't casual bumping into each other at public events. These were private planned visits. She mentions how Andrew's personal driver got called multiple times to arrange transportation for these meetings. Multiple times. That's not a one-off coincidence. That's a deliberate pattern of contact happening over a period of time. And Sarah's sitting there on camera saying she's got the details to back all this up. Specific years, exact places where these meetings happened, and people who were actually present and saw what was going down. She's not being vague about it either. When someone says they've got years and places, that's pretty specific stuff. It means she's not relying on fuzzy memories or secondhand gossip. She's talking about concrete information that can be checked out. And that's when people started leaning forward, because vague accusations fade. But years, places, witnesses, that's different. Sarah wasn't scrambling for relevance. She sounded like someone who had been sitting on this information, watching the story get rewritten over and over again until she finally decided she was done playing along.
Well, no one's going to say that, are they? Because he's now going to be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
Yes, the King's brother will be evicted.
The way Sarah's talking during this interview, you can tell she's been holding on to this information for a while. She's not emotional or angry or trying to create drama for the sake of it. She's just matter of fact about the whole thing. Like she's finally decided it's time to put it all out there and let people know what actually happened. There's this calm confidence in how she's presenting everything, like someone who knows they've got solid ground to stand on. And the thing that really stands out is ears when she says, "I've got receipts." That phrase landed like a threat wrapped in a whisper. Because when someone with royal proximity says, "I've got receipts," they're not talking about screenshots and vibes. They're talking about logs, schedules, people who were paid to be discreet and stayed silent. Until now. Why now? Why is Sarah choosing this exact moment to bring up something that happened back in 2009? That's what everyone's asking. And that question is where this story stops being history and starts being motive. Because timing is never accidental. Not in royal circles. Not when silence has been maintained for over a decade. Something shifted. Something snapped. And Sarah made it clear, once the door opens, it doesn't close again. Now here's where things get even more interesting. Andrew's former driver actually shows up on the same podcast. And this guy isn't just some random person making claims. He was literally there. And that's where the room really went quiet. Because now it wasn't just Sarah talking anymore. It was someone whose job was to remember dates, routes, locations. Someone whose livelihood depended on precision. Someone who didn't need fame and sounded like he didn't want it. He talks about calls, pickups, quiet arrangements. At least 3 times, maybe more. Special guest, low-key, luxury locations, yachts, private villas, not the kind of places you stumble into by accident. And then comes the moment he clearly didn't expect to ever say out loud, walking back into a room and realizing he should not have been there. The kind of moment that burns itself into memory whether you want it to or not. And what gives his account weight isn't drama, it's paperwork, schedules, logs, times, routes, things that don't care about public opinion. From there, everything accelerates. Statements, denials, pushback. But something noticeable happens. The response focuses on attacking the messenger, not the records, not the dates, not the logs. And Sarah doesn't flinch. She fires back, doubles down. Hints that the driver isn't alone, that others were there, watching, waiting. And suddenly, this isn't a single accusation anymore. It's a line forming behind it. And that's where this becomes dangerous. Because one voice can be dismissed. But patterns change everything. And once that driver finished speaking, you could feel the air change. It wasn't loud outrage. It wasn't shock for show. It was that uncomfortable pause where people realized this isn't going away. Because the driver didn't sound bitter. He didn't sound rehearsed. He sounded like someone who had been carrying a professional memory for years and finally decided he was done pretending it never happened. And that's what made it so unsettling. No emotion, no exaggeration. Just dates, places, routines. The kind of details you only remember when it was your actual job to remember them. And then, almost on cue, the response came out from Meghan's side. Fast, sharp, direct, denial. She doesn't know this driver. He's lying. He's fabricating. But what people noticed immediately wasn't what was said, it was what wasn't. No mention of schedules. No challenge to the logged trips. No explanation for the routes, the villas, the repeated arrangements. It was a classic maneuver. Discredit the voice, avoid the evidence. And for some people, that might have been enough. But for others, it only made the silence louder. Sarah didn't wait. She never does. She answered back with the confidence of someone who already expected the denial. Almost like she'd rehearsed this moment in her head years ago. Her words weren't defensive. They were sharp, knowing, almost disappointed. As if she were saying, this again? This pattern again? And then she did something strategic. She widened the lens. She made it clear this wasn't about one driver, one memory, one story. This was about a network of people who had been around at the time. Staff, friends, witnesses. People who didn't benefit from lying but might finally benefit from telling the truth. And that's when the tone of the entire situation shifted from messy gossip to something heavier. Because when multiple people are hinted at, the question stops being, is this true? And becomes, how many people know something they haven't said yet? The back and forth turned public and fast. Statements, counter-statements, subtle jabs disguised as polite phrasing. And through it all, Sarah looked unbothered, not frantic, not reactive, calm, calculated, like someone who knew she had already crossed the point of no return and wasn't interested in walking anything back. Then comes the 2016 layer, and this is where the story stops being distant history and becomes personal. According to someone close to Sarah, someone who had watched everything unfold from the inside, Meghan didn't just exist in Andrew's past, she reappeared at exactly the wrong moment. Events, gatherings, intimate social circles, not massive crowds where coincidence is believable, but small rooms where presence is intentional. And it wasn't subtle. The friend describes it as deliberate, flirtatious, Strategic. Positioning. Conversations pulled aside. Moments created. From Sarah's point of view, this wasn't just awkward. It was devastating. Because at that time, there were quiet conversations happening. Possibilities. A reconnection that wasn't public yet, but was real to her. And watching another woman insert herself into that space again was the final break. Whatever chance existed collapsed. And Sarah didn't scream about it. She didn't leak it. She simply cut contact. Completely. For years. That detail matters because it reframes everything. This isn't a random takedown. This is unresolved hurt that was swallowed for a very long time. And when Sarah confirms she stopped speaking to Meghan altogether, it explains the edge in her voice now. This isn't just exposure, it's reckoning. And just when people thought the story couldn't escalate further, Sarah drops the real bomb, the book. Not a memoir, not a soft reflection. A full biography, timelines, names, networks, patterns, something permanent, something that doesn't disappear when the news cycle changes. And that's when the reaction changes again. Because after all the denials, all the fast responses, all the statements, there's silence. No comment, no rebuttal, no dismissal, just nothing. And silence in moments like this speaks louder than any press release ever could. People start speculating. Is it legal advice? Is it exhaustion? Is it fear of amplifying what's coming? Or is it the realization that once something is printed, indexed, archived, you can't just outrun it? A podcast fades. A book sits on shelves. And while the public debate explodes, the fallout starts showing up elsewhere. Business relationships quietly end. Contracts dissolve. Brands pull away without ceremony. The language shifts from collaboration to risk. And that's when you know something has changed for real. Because companies don't walk away from money unless the cost is too high. At the same time, public sentiment doesn't turn into rage, it turns into indifference. And that might be the most dangerous part. People stop arguing. They stop defending. They stop caring. Attention moves on. And when relevance fades, rebuilding becomes almost impossible. Behind the scenes, the pressure reportedly starts eating away at everything. Isolation, anger, obsession with what's coming next, replaying interviews, rereading statements, wondering who else might speak. And that kind of stress doesn't stay contained. It bleeds into relationships, into homes, into quiet moments that used to feel safe. What began as one podcast appearance has now become a chain reaction. One voice becomes two. Two become hints of many. Interviews become documentation. Documentation becomes publication. And publication becomes permanence. And the most unsettling part of all of it is this. None of it started with shouting. It started calmly, confidently, with someone who had waited long enough and finally decided she was done protecting a version of events that never protected her in return. And now the question isn't whether more is coming. It's who's next to speak. It's who's next to speak. It's who's next to speak. It's who...